Soundscape.
Soundscape. And we're live on Parry Talks. We're back, episode 18, I think. We're actually keeping track of episodes this chapter because I'm trying to show that I'm a bit more organized and professional than I would have been before. Now, this is a professional media organization. So welcome back, number 2 of the Zoom series / saga. We've got another local legend. We're bringing it back home again. No more international DJs, no more interstate rappers. We don't need any of that. We got to keep it true to heart with the one, the only, AK Sports. How you doing?
G'day.
Well, I guess you could call yourself an international DJ.
Yeah, I was going to say, I did just come back from London, so I was trying to get that, vibe going for me, so you completely undermine that, and
technically, you are our first international guest on Parry Talks.
Yes.
Let's just get straight into it because you already mentioned it. You just moved back from London, unfortunately, because of coronavirus. If you just maybe aside from music, how was that process coming back? Did you have to quarantine? Was it hectic? How did you finally make a decision to be I'm coming home?
Man, so that was tough because I was educating myself a little bit on what might happen a bit sooner than other people were, listening to podcasts with epidemiologists and people that study pandemics. So I just knew that everything was going to go on lockdown over there. And I had started, because I was working as a DJ and also helping out in events as artist liaison at Printworks, which has been fucking sick. So obviously events and also a little bit of hospital on the side. So those two industries were hit pretty hard, pretty soon into the whole crisis.
The whole thing.
I was going to say saga, but then I didn't want to steal the saga or take away from Parry Talks saga. But yeah, epidemic. So yeah, I had to actually make the call pretty quickly to come back because I knew either be stuck in London in a flat where it could kind of get worse, where maybe I won't get the same medical treatment as I might if I was in my home country, worst case scenario, or and it was just kind of my parents live in sort of coastal northern New South Wales now, so it would actually, the contrast between sticking it out there for 6 months or sticking it out in a beautiful area, in a small flat in London versus a beautiful area with lots of space and nicer weather and stuff seemed to be a bit of a no-brainer. But it was a decision that had to be made very quickly, and I literally booked a flight back. People that I knew in London either were employed and were just staying at home in their nice houses with their nice salaries, or they were doing maybe more creative contract stuff like me, and everyone in those positions lost their jobs pretty quickly and prospects, and everyone was making the call straight away. People were flying home the day after. I flew home 3 days after. A girl I knew, 3 days after I made the call, and a girl I knew actually decided to stay a little bit longer, which wasn't a smart move. And then she was one of those people that was stuck in the whole hotel jail time.
Yeah.
Thing.
That is...
Whoa, she was telling me some stories. It was rough. Some people were saying oh, don't make it out as if it's this horrible jail time. I have a friend who got to pick, from 3 courses every day. I'm well, I had a friend who got fed nothing on the airplane on the way over because it was a reduced service, and then they didn't get food for 12 hours or something. And when someone did drop things off, they were just military trained people that were just running away. So there was no human contact they had for days. Mind you, it did get better, but I'm really grateful that I wasn't in that position.
Yeah, and I've got a friend who is in quarantine now in a hotel, had to move back from Berlin, and he is making DIY green screens with the hotel sheets and stuff, and
Nice.
and trying to make friends with the guy across from him in the corridor, and knocking on walls, trying to do Morse code and stuff. So he's really making the most of it, but he's a bit of a pseudo influencer, so that might be why.
Really? Oh, pseudo influencer. Yeah, I mean, it's also a hard time to be creative, you know, so that's cool that he was still doing that. But like, I haven't written much music since I've been back. I've had some other things I've been working on, but in terms of getting into creative flow, like it's been quite difficult. And I also have like, yeah, the experience of mine, it wasn't quite in a hotel, but I'm in a house by myself. So I was in a house by myself for 2 weeks. So that was very strange, like not being able to have any sort of contact with people, and you know, going from my life, you know, with my partner over in London to being by myself here was like, yeah, complete flip of situations, you know.
Yeah, and I feel like for a lot of creative people, the conversation I've been having with was like, and you've probably struggled with it because of how much of a rush it's been, but for the people that have just been like stayed at home and stuff, it took like a good while for my brain to process like this is a new normal, so like get used to it. And then like once I realized that after like 3 weeks of just being in like full lockdown, I was like, oh, now I can start thinking about doing more interviews, or now I can start thinking about writing articles again. Like it's hard to adjust your entire brain to like start to believe like this is the new normal. So like I feel you on that one hardcore.
Fully. I'm definitely sitting in it now, though. I was able to like do a lot of self work that I didn't realize that I needed, you know, that we don't really usually have time for. And like even exercising, like I've had nothing else to really do but that sometimes. I'm really grateful for that. And then you realize how connected your body and mind are. So like the stronger you are physically, like you're so much more in tune and cluey and intelligent when you're a bit fit up. Not that I'm super fit, but yeah, just like being able to work on little things like that in small ways has been cool.
Yeah, and mindfulness and like achieving mindfulness is so different now. Like I used to like go out and like listen to music really loud, and like that's when I was in my zone where it's like nothing else mattered. But like now I've got to do that by myself in my bedroom. It's like, how does this? It's not how it works. It's like retraining that, and like for a lot of people, I think especially in our dance world, like retraining, like because we are so like tied to our communities as like, you know, self-coping mechanisms, is like that's what we look forward to. But now we've drawn it all back to being like, let's refocus on ourselves. And I think that's a cool thing that might have come out for some people out of this.
Totally.
Also on the exercise thing, there's like a river track, like the Cooks River Trail, all through like from like inner southwest Sydney, all the way to the airport through to Brighton and stuff. And I've never seen so many people on that track in my life. And I'm out there like, what are you guys doing? Like, don't teach your kid how to ride a bike now. Like, are you serious? Like, it's so crazy. So if you're listening and you live near that, don't go on it, please.
I went to Rushcut. I popped down to Sydney for a couple of work things last week. And I went briefly to Rushcutters Bay Park, and it was shocking how many people were out and about in close proximity, touching each other's dogs and stuff. I was like, this is not social distancing, you absolute psychos. So, but it's also hard being in, you know, a city in such a densely populated area. We can't all be at home and not go outside, but like people don't realize you shouldn't be touching each other's dogs right now.
Just bowls of bacteria, our dogs.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
And like
the barriers.
On that as well, how do you think the attitude in London was different to what you've seen or seen from afar in Australia about this whole thing? Just as a general intrigue point.
I mean, it's hard to say because I was judging in the times when you were told to stay home, but like restaurants and bars and stuff were still open. I was very much judging people for still going out when you could do other things like sit, if you want to see your friends, like sit in a park, get takeaway beers, sit with some distance. It's just like smarter ways about it. But it was also way more drastic there at the time. And it's very densely populated London. It's like 9 million people, you know. So like what I saw and judged was, it was actually a very small percentage. So people were taking it quite seriously. And I think Australians by nature are kind of anti-authoritarian, you know, we don't really like being told what to do. So Aussies, like, yeah, I think everyone's like fairly lax, but it's also like unfortunate to be just thrown back into the toxicity of the police force and government and community relationships that we have in Sydney, and it's just come back to it straight away with like how the cops are being with people and like the way they're treating the citizens is just like dog shit pretty much. I know we're rebelling as well, but like that's not at all a thing in London. Like people respect the authorities, and the authorities respect people, and they're dealing with real shit, and they don't treat people like everyone's a criminal. So yeah, I don't know, is that making sense?
Yeah, it makes so much, because the one thing I've paid attention to is if you look where the arrests are in, like, not to make this a political podcast, but where the arrests are in Sydney in terms of like what areas and what postcodes a lot of the arrests are in, it's like like you can just tell that they're picking on certain people and like looking out for like in certain areas and stuff, rather than like going to like more affluent areas and stuff. Like, it's crazy.
That's interesting, but and I would usually like to agree with you, but to be honest, I've heard a lot of stories from in that said Rush Gutters Bay Park, people were getting fined, and that's a very, very rich park. It's just everyone that owns property in like Darling and Potts Point, you know. And also in Bondi, people getting a lot of fines, and that's typically fairly wealthy people. But I mean, probably more, I mean, it's everywhere. But yeah, a lot of that Target as well.
Politics, hey?
What are you, Greens?
Yeah, I think there's something like always connected between any sort of, not to get too deep, but any sort of underground community. There's always some sort of social, like this, like a lot of the uniting force in sometimes like an underground DJ culture or like an underground party scene is like intrinsically political and tied to like political and social movements anyway. So it's no surprise that we're like, this is something that we're really interested in as people, given the type of people that would be interested in talking about like, you feel me?
I feel you, dog.
So apparently you're a DJ or something.
Yeah, apparently.
Let's just go. I wanted to sort of start. I didn't want it to be a whole, and I don't like getting too mopey on these podcasts where it's like, so how did you get into music? Like, what was the first song you ever liked? And that sort of thing. So, but I think a big part of this, and like what I'm really interested in finding out about, is that move to London and where you were creatively, and how you felt as an artist / DJ before you moved. So like, where was your mind space there? What was sort of the things that wanted to make you move over there, and all that sort of thing?
That's a really good question for a few reasons. So I'd been involved in the music industry for a while in various facets. So as such, we've been fighting the good fight with the lockout laws for so long. And like, I didn't really want to throw in the towel and go to Melbourne, but I was kind of sick of like working in an industry where it felt like not just, you know, the political space was against it, but also people were starting, it felt like in some ways being like more and more apathetic about the whole thing. There's a whole new generation of young people, you know, like yourself, who might have never experienced, you know, what it used to be like, which was popping. It was crazy. It was like amazing. The music industry and the crafts was all time. And I'm so sorry you might have never got to experience that, you know, because that was a while ago. Even for me, I was underage clubbing. Like, I'm still in my 20s, but like I was going out when I was 16 with fake IDs, you know, so it was a while ago. So yeah, it's just getting more and more disappointing. And the music that I was going in personally was just like a little bit too niche for what I could expect to be, you know, successful touring artists here. And I did do some cool shows like Lost Paradise and Blue Line Steppers with Of Leisure, and like, you know, club shows around the country. But I also, my tastes were changing really quickly, and I didn't want to have to compromise on any gigs in order to stay employed as a DJ. And I really felt like London, I was ready for an adventure in London. London's obviously the hub of, you know, a lot of the underground music scene. The clubs over there set the precipice for the rest of the world, you know, like if you get booked, it, you know, if you get a residency at XOYO, or like, you know, Printworks or any of those major cool clubs, then all the cool festivals around the world follow suit and book you, and you kind of take off. And like, it's also the same here. Like, we look over there to see which Aussie artists are killing it, and then we like to support them back here too. So I kind of felt like if I went there, learnt new things, really just dive into the community, I'm sure I would grow as well in the ways that I wanted to grow, which I didn't feel like. I also didn't feel like if I was to take off massively in Australia in this new sound that I was sort of heading towards, I didn't feel like I'd be ready there yet. So I wanted to like learn more and just really focus on producing, just like have no friends and just write music and go to parties. And yeah, that's what I actually did that, you know, and I'm in a different place now. But yeah, there's a lot of reasons as to why I left, and that's a few of them.
Yeah, and I'll unpack a couple of them. And when you talk about like the generation that had no idea what it was, and before lockouts got revoked in Sydney, I was the sort of person that's like, stop complaining, all of you, just like come out, like look at us, like we're all these kids and we don't care, like we still go out, we still buy tickets. And then like the first big lockout free weekend, I went to like 3 parties in one night, and I'm like, look, I get it now. Like it was like Fiak, Nina Kravitz, DJ Boring, and Human Movement all in one night. And then I was just like, you guys were right. I was wrong. I'm sorry for whining. And
Amazing.
like, it's crazy that there's a whole generation that just like, I assumed that Sydney was normal. And I thought that that's what a normal scene looked like. And for that to just get like absolutely thrown out the window in one night is so crazy. And like, I just got a little tease of it like over the back end of this summer. And then for it now to be like normal, but then to get taken away all over again, I'm like, oh, you bastard, you cheeky bastard.
But it's so exciting because imagine what the industry is going to be like now when it starts up again.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think the only issue that we might have looking forward is I think that a lot of the people that would typically come to our parties is going to be unemployed now. So they're not going to have money, which is going to be a bit of an issue. But other than that, I think hopefully as long as the hospitality industry is booming after, if we can, then hopefully it all presents itself back.
I mean, on the money thing, like no one in London has money. Everyone has half the amount of money, but the ticket prices are really low because they understand that. And people go, and that means that everyone's way more educated. So you're like, what one party of all these amazing parties on am I going to spend my £5 on to get a ticket to? And then you go and you just get really into it. So it's like this different, it's like your experience as a young person is more valuable than how much cash you may or may not have to blow on like booze and whatnot. Like in cabs, it's like, no, you actually just, people in London value their life a bit more in terms of like going out and enjoying themselves even if they're broke, because everyone's broke. So I hope that attitude changes and, you know, ticket prices drop and people come out.
Yeah, hopefully. And it's interesting that you left at a time when I feel like this summer, like last summer in Sydney, would have been tough to watch from afar because it was like absolutely like incredible, because it just sort of 180 and it like became like, hang on a second, like this is so crazy. But maybe from a distance, how would you compare what you saw of the Sydney scene, like when you left, to watching it from afar? Like, what changes do you think that you saw from the far?
I mean,
If any.
it's always when summer kicks off anywhere, so do all the parties, you know? So that was hard to see all my friends going out while I was in winter, but I knew I was in London for a purpose, and like every summer there's these parties, you know, like nothing. If anything, I was really sad because of the fires, you know. That's what I was thinking about, was the fires, not the sick parties. And like, you know, as I said, I've been working in the music industry for a while, so I like, the older you get, the more you like, the parties will always be there. You know, I was kind of just focused on my own career in London and the UK and trying to get that off the ground there, which was very, very hard but exciting challenge.
Yeah.
So yeah, because it involves a lot of like learning and networking and yada yada yada.
Yada yada yada.
Yeah.
But and then you sort of hinted at it as well, like it would have been nice to step away from that comfort zone and just break the bubble a little bit and be like, this is the real world now. And I'm looking forward to doing that so much. Like,
and that was it. It's like a comfort zone as well. I just wanted to like experience new things and see how fucking hard it is in the heart of it, because it is. And like yeah, just get a different perspective. And I mean, not that I wasn't already really driven, but just get like an even extra drive, you know.
Yeah, beautiful. And to talk a bit more about, like you hinted at, so we're still unpacking that initial question. You hinted at like at a taste change. You said that your taste was changing musically. Do you want to jump more into that? Like, what was that initial taste first? You know, what was it bubbling into?
Like when I started, I really liked DJing interesting sounds and really aggressive, chaotic kind of drums, or like anything that came in that was a bit chaotic, and I would slip it into mixes, like, and it'd be really fun, it'd be a nice energy, but like I just was never really able to fully explore that sound, and I didn't really know there was like a market for it. And then just the more I stopped playing for the crowd and started playing for myself, was the more I was able to develop, you know. So I got a show on Balamii Radio in London before George Fitzgerald, like once a month, really cool. Like George used to come in, he came in with like DJ, someone's manager, I'm not going to say the wrong name in case I'm tossing up to do, but came in with someone's manager. It was really cool. It's just like a great space to be around, and every show I just delve into different styles. So like one was like jungle, one was like rave, one didn't like trance, and just like really high energy, faster shit that I would always work up to in sets. Whereas, you know, having a platform like Balamii, I could just start there. And I mean, mind you, they still work up a little bit, but they'd be much longer just like going ham. I just wanted, and like, you know, I didn't know that there would be an opportunity in Australia to do stuff like Sherelle does, where she just plays like 140 plus BPM, and like there's a market for that somewhere, you know. So there's like way more opportunity, which allowed over in London, which allowed me to explore these heavier sounds, you know. So yeah. And then it all circles back to Australia as well. Like there's an amazing Australian artist I've recently discovered called like DJ Plead, and he makes like like he just got a write up on RA. Yeah, and like I was like, cool, that's great. And I put a couple of his tracks in some mixes recently because I just like the percussive and slightly strange nature of it.
Yeah, he's that little like Logic 1000 Plead Cop Envy crew is like so cute and beautiful, and they all just make like turbo like tunes, and it's unique. Like it's not just like the standard, you know, like electro or breaks that you like sort of be used to. Like there's a lot of cultural influence on it, which is so brilliant and like so inspiring and engaging.
And Nervous Horizon is a label that's put out some of Plead stuff, and like they're doing really cool things, and it's all does, as you said, has a strong importance on like the cultural influences behind it, and like, you know, paying tribute to those influences in a way.
Yeah, it's awesome. Wow, that was brilliant. I always do that, by the way. I'll just like reflect on the conversation. We just say, wow, that was so great. That's just because a lot of people say, like, when I write for editorials or even do these podcasts, a lot of people come and being like, you're such a selfish interviewer, Parry. And I'm like, what does that mean? It's like you just ask things you want to know. Like you didn't think about your listener. And I'm like, that's a bit harsh. But at the same time, like, you know what, fair enough.
That's interesting. It's a good style, because you're privy to a conversation rather than anything that's, you know, too contrived.
Exactly. AK Sports cosign. That's it. I can retire now. Right, so in London, what sort of stuff were you doing in London? You talk about like artist liaisoning, helping out. Just like, were you just trying to get your, like, what was the objective of all that? Just to get your hands as dirty as possible, or were you looking for any specific experience while you were over there?
Because I have worked in different facets of the music industry, I was like, what would I, you know, use those skills in and have a bit of fun at the same time. And it was definitely still on the event side of stuff, not necessarily like booking or promoting, but just being on the ground at events. Is a lot of fun, you know, and you meet cool people, and you're in, you know, I worked for a company where very quickly in my early 20s, my office was the club and the festival, and that was fucking dope. And so that's where I feel the most kind of like relaxed amongst the anarchy. And I ended up landing a artist liaison role pretty quickly with a promoter. It wasn't necessarily the sort of music that I would froth on the artist, but like just being in that space, I'm really good on my feet with like problem solving, and I understand how events work and all the different people working at festivals and in clubs, and like what an honor to work at Printworks doing that. You know, it's just running around the guts of that club with like a radio, picking up artists and like or sorting writer, and just it's kind of fun. Just enjoyed it really.
Yeah, it's so cool. Like, oh, just Printworks. Like I'm too young to have gone or whatever, just because like the transition from school and what I'd planned to do straight after in terms of work and stuff. But like just looking at that from afar, it feels like a completely different universe. It feels fake from my point of view, if you know what I mean. And like it's like a myth. It's like you watch boiler rooms from overseas and be like, oh, it's all a myth. But like I feel like the one when I actually head over there and like touch, you know, the door and shake the Seki's hand and tell him thank you, it'll all be real and it'll be worth it. What are some things do you think in that London scene or in that London bubble we could translate as a community back in Sydney, whether it's an attitude, a culture, or something more practical in terms of just like better practices?
That's a really, really fun idea. It's hard because the police presence is so taxing emotionally, and that translates to how we party. So everyone is just freer over there because they don't have that same shit that we have to deal with. I don't know. I mean, mind you, I haven't been around for a while, so you can let me know.
It hasn't changed.
These days. Exactly. So like that is such a big, that was the first thing I noticed when I left, was how much more relaxed and happy and freer I was when I arrived, because the authorities didn't scare me. The authorities, I was grateful they were around because they were dealing with real shit, you know. And like everyone is just, I mean, we do get that sort of vibe, you know, in warehouses in the inner west when the security guards are really nice and you're like, wow, this is great, but it still risks getting raids by cops. And like, you know, if anyone wants to indulge in any substances, that's totally their choice, and they should be able to make that choice as an adult and deal with, you know, take care of themselves and take care of their friends. And like that's the thing about Berlin as well. When you go, it's like people are just treated like adults. Like not everyone is on drugs, but people that are on drugs is totally cool because they're taking just a small amount because they know how to take drugs. They're not freaking out and dropping 5 caps because there's a cop coming at them, you know. So I do want to forgive everyone with that in mind before I do try to say how we can take notes of London, but that is such a big thing to the whole attitude of events. But yeah, I mean, I would love to see just more people out at more things, just supporting their friends more often, and like being out there, just being a few things on so you can just party hop a bit and it's just more casual rather than like, you know, being like lockout laws did that. You changed everything. You kind of have to like come to the party, stay at the party, doors closed, you're not allowed to leave, you know, stay there, and like you're just in this one space. It's just like not free, it's just a bit edge. Like,
yeah.
But imagine if we had, you know, all those cool warehouses we have in the inner west and you could just hop around to them because they were affordable and there weren't authorities like down your throat. I think it's harder to achieve in said
conditions.
Yeah. But I mean, everyone's a bit more DIY over there, you know, like you could do like the whole streaming thing. We could just do more when you're allowed to actually have people around, you know. People could just do like boiler room style. There's another thing called like Hush in London that's kind of like boiler room but like a little bit more DIY, you know. We could do shit like that and just get involved.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's launch it. Yeah, brilliant. And that attitude thing is so true, because if you're heading into a club and when you're in the club or before you enter the club, you're worried because am I going to get in? Is the Seki going to think my ID's fake, even though it's obviously real, even though I look 30 and I'm 20? And like just all that angst like manifests itself in shit behavior, because when people are nervous, they don't make right decisions. And because of that, like it says so much about like just the attitude and like the tension in a Sydney club. Like the fact that there is tension is so weird. Like the fact that at any second, like anyone could get kicked out and stuff like that. And it's so crazy. And like you go to Melbourne or you go to like a certain BYO like private party in Sydney and you can just feel the difference because you like there's just the attitude change. And I think that for the general public, That's where a lot of change is going to come. Just like changing the attitude, just letting people know that like you can go out in Sydney and it can be fun, I think is so important.
Yeah, I mean, on reflection, like I was getting kind of salty at everyone just throwing in the towel and like having, like just staying in the house and getting like, you know, loosey goosey in their house. But you know, if you think about the tension in the club, which is supposed to be the place where we relieve our tension, that's the whole point of these spaces, are to dance out our stresses of the week. And yeah, it's just it's scary in that regard. So yeah, like I guess I do put a bit of forgiveness on people just partying at home. But and also I wanted to say, like, this might be a bit controversial, but all those kids dying at music festivals, I kind of blame the government and the police presence in the exact same way that I was saying before. Like,
that's what I was trying to hint at with
sorry, they haven't had like the cross to go to grow up and experiment maybe with something, or like any, like the only thing left musically aside from like a select cool space of selection of warehouse parties that is actually a pretty bit of a bubble of the people that go.
Exactly, they're so hard to access.
So they haven't been given the breathing room to like learn how to take drugs properly, and then that happens and they just eat 5 caps because festivals are the only thing that they can let loose at, and even then it's stressful. It's a stressful environment.
Yeah. And one of the spots that you've missed, and I don't want to go into too much detail because it's like all I speak about with my friends, is this Mothership spot. And it's like this DIY, but it's like the first DIY, like other than the Rimbombo party spot, there's this like, that's open air, like 4 till 10 p.m. And it's the biggest vibe ever. Like it's absolutely unreal. Like the gallery party was there and stuff like that. And like, like when stuff gets back, you'll enter that arena and you'll be like, okay, this is something special.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I feel like we could talk about like the DIY and the whole scene conversation for so long, but you do have an EP coming out, and I don't want to, I want to help obviously talk about that because music is important. And I think especially from like your last releases and like the little single splattering, I'm really excited for it as well. Also, how was your creative process? Like, because I don't want to harp on for now because obviously it's a big transitional period for yourself coming back and that sort of thing, but how was your creative process in London? How was hopping into producing and fully focusing on producing? Like, was that an exciting thing for you to do, or was it easier when you were balancing it with more DJing and that sort of thing?
So the only way that I've ever really made strides in my producing ability is when I've had slim to no money and slim to no friends around. So I was in LA doing some like acting things a few years ago, and that's what really launched like the first release, because I just had nothing else to do but finally do this thing that was actually quite stressful. I always really wanted to produce, but it's like learning a new skill. When you're a bit older, you're like, oh God, like, do I have the time? Do I have the drive? Do I have the energy? Like, will I even be good at this? So it's like a lot of like positive self-talking to give yourself while you're learning this very intimidating space. Like music language is crazy, but like it also fits me like a glove. Like, because I was really good at maths, and I was also quite, creative in terms of writing and art stuff. Art stuff in general. So yeah, it actually suits me really well. So the more I get into it, like the easier it is to keep going, and like the more interesting it is for me. But yeah, so in that regard, it was actually, I had way more time to write in London because, I was starting a new life, and like it's very expensive over there. And like the only people I knew, most of them were like in West London and like cushy 9-to-5 jobs, which was like the opposite of what I was doing. So yeah, it was great in London. I just would pump out, like some days nothing would come, but like most days I was writing music and, pumping it out, which is great. So you literally don't have any other excuse.
Yeah. And is the EP that's coming out on Gallery a manifestation of that writing period? Or is the EP from like years and years of sort of writing? Because your debut single was a fair while, not a while ago, but there has been a fair bit of time.
2018. Yeah, I've actually been sitting on this music for a while. And with labels, I wanted the right one. I actually initially gave it to a sub label of Lobster Theremin, and then something happened with her and she had to push it back. And then Angus and I were hanging out one day and I was playing some music at a house and he was like, what the fuck, this is sick, I would totally release this. And I was like, yeah. So I, and we went through all the demos together and picked it. And also he also, they weren't actually finished, so we worked on it together, him giving a couple notes on what he thought would be good to finish the track, and I also agreed they weren't finished. So like together, did the last 5% of a few and picked them. But then as with labels are, it's waiting for releases can take a while. So most of this was actually written before London, but finished up, a few of them were finished up in London. Like one of the tracks I actually changed the vibe up completely in London. So I mean, that happened. It's kind of like, I flipped one of the synths to like double time, which completely changed the energy. So that was like even though it didn't take much time, that was like a major idea behind the track was done in London in that regard. But most of the music that I wrote there is not on this release, but it's important to get these tracks out because they were where I was at initially.
It's your base. And talk about, sorry, I just lost my train of thought completely.
Sorry.
I've killed it. I was about to ask an absolute burner of a question, but trusty old Parry forgot it. Now, I was going to talk about this obviously won't be out. This will obviously be out before the EP. So what track are you most excited for people to hear and why?
Shit, fam. That's a hard question because this EP to other people apparently makes sense, but to me, they're all so different.
Mm-hmm.
The tracks, like one's kind of like ravey, dark, another one's like literally just a jam that I made that me and Angus decided to put on there because it was interesting. And then another one is like very emotional. Like, okay, that's it. So there's one track that I have my own vocals on, speaking in French, and it's like a really personal, and it's really like building and euphoric and drivey, and then just like crescendo of like crazy drums. So like I don't know if you'd play it in the club, but it's just kind of interesting. It's like almost poppy in the structure because you're on a bit of a journey, but like it was inspired by club sounds, and I think it's cool having your own stamp on it, even if I'm speaking French.
Exactly. And you talk about different moods, and there are, like you say, there's different moods on the EP. Is there like a consistency in your creative process, in the sense that do most of your songs start from a feeling or an idea, or do they start as, I want to make a club tool that sort of sounds like this, or is it as scattered as possible and it's just like whatever comes out?
I mean, I write breakbeat mostly, so breakbeat has its own feeling, which is kind of like a bit ravey, but then there's like a lot of breakbeat out at the moment that has really really lush synths around it, just sort of scattered, that like really spacious. So that's sort of what I was doing a little bit there, and that creates a different level of emotion. So it's sort of out of the initial high energy club 150 BPM style to like a bit slower and like, oh god, what was the question? What was the question?
I've forgotten the question. Oh, just like, what's your creative process? Is there a consistency in it when you're chopping and changing between all the moods, or is it pretty just straightforward? It's just whatever comes out or whatever.
Sorry, creative process. So creative process always, like these tracks all started with breakbeat sensibilities, and then that was the creative process because I just started from that as a base, and everything else came off it. But like what I've been learning lately is like, if you have a feeling or an idea, you just need to like sit down and just like nut it out and like make sure you finish the track, even if you like in terms of structure. Otherwise you're just going to have hundreds and hundreds of ideas. But you need to like actually get it to like start, middle, end, and then you can revisit it. And it's important to nut it out when you do have that feeling, because you're going to lose it if you don't, So that's what has been my creative process lately, is working on feelings.
Perfect. I was about to say, that's beautiful stuff. And like one of the things that comes to my mind now is like, you have been sitting on the EP for a little while. Now that it's coming out, what's the feeling? Is it excitement? Is it relief? Is it nervousness because, maybe you've developed your skills since these songs? Like, how do you feel?
I was really impatient for ages on it, but in terms of how delayed it felt. But now with, you know, retrospect, I'm actually so grateful for how long it's taken, because now I've had the time to build up some other songs in a different style that I would be able to send, like happily be able to send. And also the whole process of releasing an EP and working with a label, especially someone as awesome as Tukes, it's like fucking exciting. It's sick. You're like getting new press pics and like try to figure out what websites might put. I mean, and then it's scary if no one cares, but like at the moment in my mind I'm just trying to imagine abundance, because like, and especially at this time, like where everyone's at home, I feel like even though the tracks might not get played in the club, like it's different time, everyone's slowed down and might have more time to actually open up a press release and listen to an EP. You know, maybe it will get more traction right now. And if it wasn't so delayed, I wouldn't have got the Splendor in the Grass booking either. So it's
Exactly.
like, like everything has come together really nicely. So I'm just really happy. It finally feels like I'm a producer now.
Yeah, and that would be an excellent feeling. And you talk about finally being a producer because you have done so much work in the music industry already. How do you think just like that, you know, that wrapped circular knowledge of the music industry has helped, say, writing an EP or, you know, just making music, if at
I
all?
mean, it's definitely easier because I don't necessarily need a manager in other ways. Some people do need managers, but then and I definitely can see through bullshit so easily now, like, and I feel really bad for young musicians coming in because they just get thrown around. So many people in the industry like promise the world or like just come in and like I don't know, it's just like my bullshit radar is just so when I know exactly. But at the same time it's still like really risky business trying to be an artist, like really, really, really risky business. But I'm a performer by nature. I always have been like involved in the arts and, you know, acting from when I was young. So like, and creating in that regard. So I love being on stage. I make the best art with an audience, and it's about sharing all these crazy feelings I have in a
Feelings and ideas.
tangible way. Yeah.
Acting. No, we're not going to get into that.
No, that's
I'll
not.
leave that. Yeah, but I think that's so exciting. And I think that talking to artists at this stage of their career is so exciting as well, because there's like so much like optimism and excitement, and it doesn't feel like a full-time job or anything yet. So like hearing this sort of stuff is, I think for some people, like if you're listening at home and like you're like, oh shit, like maybe I should make an EP. I feel like it's a lot easier to hear that from someone that's like just like about to reach their debut and talking really excitingly about it, instead of like some, you know, some jock that's like, you know,
Joke.
like it's just more accessible. And I think that having these conversations are really important in terms of just
I know.
passing down that wisdom.
I'd say so as well. But at the same time, like, this might be the most exciting time in my career when my eyes are still wide, you know, like this EP might come out, no one gives a fuck. People, if anything, are like, ooh, and then I don't get the gigs that I want, and then my producing career is over. So there's two options.
And just to pick back up on a point you were saying, with the Corona might help the EP in terms of people paying attention to it. I think that sometimes on dance EPs, people gloss over, you know, the more listenable, emotional tracks if there's like a big club tool on the EP, and they're just like, yeah, I'll buy the EP. I'll just rinse the A side and don't worry about the B side. But I think people might pay a bit more attention now to the listenable tracks, which could be like a silver lining on this as well.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Man, every time I look up at the camera, I just want to dye my hair bright pink.
No, it's supposed to be red.
You know, and like we're wrapping up now because we've been talking for close to an hour. But if, I was going to say, my favorite thing about this episode so far is that we haven't been doing so many shout outs. Like if you listen to OG Parry Talks episodes, everyone's like, shout out this person, shout out that person. It's like, let's keep it personal.
Shout out Parry, shout out AK Sports.
2 more questions that I ask everybody. The first one is, what are the goat mixes, goat boiler rooms? You can just 3 in a particular order if possible.
It's so hard. 3. I think Sherelle's really cool. She's like this new artist coming out of London that, as I mentioned her before, she plays like 140 plus, and like it's just really that beautiful vibe where it's just kind of like freaking out. And
Yeah.
it's like high energy. I don't know if you've seen that, but like
The backspins in that are absolutely insane. Yeah.
I kind of like, there's like a Scream boiler room, which is a classic.
Yeah.
I like him in Disclosure, and he's just so fucked, and like everyone's so fucked, and then there's like feathers in the air and shit. Like that's a pretty good boiler room. I don't know if I have another one. Is it boiler room specific?
No.
Yeah.
No, we can do anything, any mixes. I really put the pressure on people. This is usually the most awkward moment of every single interview. Just being like, just have like a really conversational 45 minutes and then be like, what are your favorite boiler rooms? Answer now. It's like a bit rude, but
I don't know. I don't really listen back to heaps of them, to be honest. Like, oh, you know what? Actually, I'm going to say, Ben UFO's deck mantle set was fucking sick.
hectic. And the last question is just, you have to neck nominate someone to come on Parry Talks, or someone that you can recommend, someone that'd be great to have a yarn to, of a friend of yours or anything.
Oh. I mean, all right. I neck nominate Chrissy Jammin, who is part of the techno duo Side Boob. And I nominate her because they've been doing work in the industry like me in a few roles, but they've also been throwing this weekly party Sunday service in King's Cross for the past few years, like right in the middle of lockout laws, and actually really doing their bit, as well as, being a cool techno producer, and has toured Australia and Asia as a tour manager, and she's just got a lot of life experience and cool stories, and also exciting times ahead as a producer, I think. So, and maybe not in the bubble of all the people that we know mutually.
Exactly,
so horizons a bit.
Jack Limmer, get on the podcast. Strange Associates, get on. No, that's beautiful. That's Side Notes very well taken. Let me send me a couple.
Have you heard of Side Boob?
Yeah, I have. Heard of. I can't say I'm extremely knowledgeable, but definitely on the radar.
Yeah.
AK Sports, Parry Talks. What an episode. That was hectic. That went so quickly.
Yeah, I feel like we've been talking for like 20 minutes.